Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the FinTech Hunting Podcast. We've got an incredible guest for you today. He's an industry thought leader, a next level connector, a LinkedIn guru, author, and now president of MISMO. Please help me welcome back to the show, Brian Vieaux.
Where's all the applause, the confetti? Come on. Thank you,
Oh,
Michael.
it's happening. Believe me, it's happening with all the listeners. Brian, It was great to see you at MBA Annual. I know we got to speak for a couple of minutes, but now we get a chance to do a deep dive. You've had a chance more than a day or two of being on the job, only a week or so, but let's kind of jump in from what we talked about at Annual for maybe our listeners who weren't able to tune in, and let's do a deeper dive. First, why MISMO? Why now?
Yeah, great question. It's one that I've come to enjoy answering the question. I started, by the way, I love I'm ADD kicking in. I see the Rethink Everything Green Book. So reminder, my name may be on the front, but you were a big contributor to that book. And so I thank you again for that, Michael.
That was my pleasure.
So I spent 28 years in kind of mortgage production proper, right, as a lender. A lot of that was with regulated financial institutions, most recently Flagstar Bank. And then I spent 6+ years on the technology partner, dreaded vendor side of the business. I always hate that vendor word, but and I've always kind of leaned towards advocacy from those spots, in business, because this is the only industry I've ever worked in since, college. And so I have a passion for all things housing, and the only thing I haven't done in my career is literally sit in a full-time role that serves the entire ecosystem, not just a single brand or logo.
Right.
And so for me, it was right time, right place. It was, if this is going to be the last chapter of my career, what better way to do it than to do it in a role that truly can serve the broader ecosystem of players. But ultimately, we all are here to serve the consumers, the homeowners and home buyers. And so when I thought of it that way, it became kind of a no-brainer for me.
Well, I love it. And I think you can bring such a different vantage point to it of being on the vendor side, all of the experiences on the lender side. And then on the vendor, it was different in the sense that you had to do a bunch of brand building and a bunch of visibility, and you became very involved in LinkedIn and sharing your story. And I think those are skills and traits that are going to help you immensely get the word out about MISMO and where MISMO's going.
Yeah, I was talking to a couple of people outside of our industry that are a lot younger than you and I, and it was actually at the airport. It was last week at the airport in the Delta Lounge. It was one of those days when all the stuff was happening with the slowdowns of air travel. Yep. So the Delta Lounge was overly crowded to the point where you had to wait to get in. And so, I literally ended up sitting at a chair that was at somebody else's table just because that's all you could do. And these two people were kind of complaining about having to learn like new skills. And these are like early 30s type people. They were kind of complaining about new skills and what's this going to do for me? And to your point, I said, guys, look I'm a 57-year-old who's, 20 days into a brand new job. And I'm convinced that the only reason I'm in this role at MISMO is because of what I learned 6 years doing what I did at FinLocker, building the brand, building the awareness, leveraging social media, partnering with great people like yourself, Michael, and basically putting myself out there and networking. And so I'm like, if I could do that at, 51, 52, without being a digital native, quit complaining and just go do it, whatever it is.
That is so true. And I really do think those skills are going to play very well for you at MISMO. So let's talk about what is the mission of MISMO?
Yeah. So probably a lot of your audience will know more about MISMO than some of the average groups I've been in front of. And I'm not disparaging those groups, but I know who your typical audience is. It's a bunch of smart people that are well connected and probably spend more time thinking about things like MISMO, data standards, and data interoperability, blah, 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 blah. What I've come to understand here in the last several weeks, and even leading up to starting with MISMO, is that MISMO essentially is the language of lending, and it's the language of lending as it relates to how platforms talk to each other from a data exchange perspective, how platforms talk to each other from a true technology perspective. And so MISMO is more than just a standards organization, which is the product that we create as an organization. It's really this true language of lending that allows interoperability between lenders and servicers and technology providers and GSEs and downstream investors, buyers of mortgage-backed securities, et cetera. And I didn't understand all of that until I started this process and started doing my homework. And I challenge anybody that's watching, listening to this conversation to show me a loan that was produced in your organization that did not have a MISMO standard as part of its core manufacturing process, because you're not going to find it.
Right. Well, I love that. And I think as we start talking, I think one of your other goals you mentioned in MBA was building this awareness and leveraging the incredible LinkedIn community that you have. And I love that challenge. Go look at your loan, see what wasn't touched by MISMO. So as we talk about all this, one of the biggest buzzwords at MBA Annual, at any conference that I've spoken at or you've spoken at in the last year, has been AI in lending.
Yeah.
First, give me kind of where do you see AI in lending, and then let's dive deeper into what's MISMO's role in that going forward.
Yeah, so it's here. It's in lending. It's not going away, right? It's not a fad. It's not a gimmick. It's real. And what's exciting and maybe scary at the same time is how fast it's accelerating and growing and becoming more impactful. And it's what's interesting about AI. I mean, AI's been around forever in mortgage lending. You could argue
learning and
DULP, those are models, so they're variations of early machine learning type models, right? But what's really fascinating to me today is where we're seeing the models in the manufacturing process, typically around decisioning, taking off at even a faster pace, but the agentic AI that's starting to do tasks and do things that otherwise would have been done by a human or as part of a human's job. And then what really gets exciting is how much loan officers at the top of the funnel are leveraging different tools in their business development, sales and marketing, and personal branding efforts. So it's everywhere.
I agree that it's everywhere. So walk me through kind of where does MISMO fit into this whole AI in lending process?
So if we stay on just the premise that the models are only as good as the data that goes into them, then one could also argue that to make a model even more powerful, data that's standardized is even more valuable in that particular model, and perhaps other models, and it could accelerate the learning in other models. So, at the core of MISMO is standardization and data standardization in particular. So, it's easy for me to connect the dots and make the case that absent, standardization, it'll be harder to scale your use of some of the models for loan manufacturing, loan decisioning. So that's one piece of it where I can connect the dots in how MISMO can play a role. And we have active initiatives and work groups that are dealing with some of those, industry problems and creating solutions today. Probably the bigger opportunity as it relates to AI is if if we believe that we're really in the first inning, I think we talked about this at MBA, if we're really as an industry in the first inning of AI in the mortgage ecosystem, then so are the regulators.
Yep.
And so now's the best time to bring together the lenders, the technology partners and providers, the AI platforms, and those that are going to oversee and regulate, the lenders in our industry, and come together through the MISMO ecosystem platform, if you will, to create solutions, i.e. standards around how do we define the responsible use of AI? What's in and what's out of scope as it relates to what a regulator is going to look at as it relates to AI, things like that. And I don't know, from putting my lender hat on from, several years back, it surely was a lot easier to run a business when you knew what the rules were up front versus a little bit of the gotcha oversight that we had kind of coming out of the crash. So
Right.
I think this is how MISMO can really play a central part in bringing all those parties together.
Well, and I think one of the interesting dynamics, I was on a panel at ICE Experience on AI, and somebody from the audience was, well, I'm waiting for the regulators to tell me exactly what I can do. And somebody from stage said, we don't necessarily need more lending laws. We have plenty of lending laws. Fair lending is fair lending, and redlining is redlining.
Yeah.
What you need, though, is more internal policies and guardrails about what's appropriate use, because whether you break fair lending laws and it's a person or it was your AI agent, you still broke the law.
That's right. Yeah.
So where do you kind of see that as kind of that policies and the guardrails and helping people internally figure out how should they responsibly use AI?
Well, I think I'll describe where MISMO sits in the ecosystem, and that might be able to help your audience connect the dots. So MISMO is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Mortgage Bankers Association.
Yep.
In my role as president of MISMO, I also concurrently sit on the senior management team of MBA. And so when we think about advocacy and policy, that's what MBA does all day long, twice a day on Sunday. And we're recording this the day after, a Sunday where the Senate was in session voting on a critical a vote to kind of hopefully move us off of a shutdown, right? And so the MBA team that works that stuff they were glued in, and not just glued in on watching, C-SPAN or whatever. They were developing what's our talking points this morning. So from an advocacy and policy perspective, MISMO has the resources of the broader MBA team to benefit the entire ecosystem. And this is important. You don't just get benefit from MISMO if you're an MBA member. We exist for the entire industry, not just MBA members. We happen to be founded and sit inside of MBA from a structure, but the nonprofit that is MISMO is a community that serves the entire industry. We have our own independent board of directors that has representatives from all different channels of the lending side of the business, from technology, from GSEs. So we're independent in that regard to MBA, but we have the luxury of having the benefit of access to those key resources. So while MISMO directly won't be in the weeds working on policy, the community that we bring together to solve a particular problem, this being how are we going to put in action those guardrails, those processes for the responsible use of AI. We bring together subject matter experts from, again, the industry, lenders of all shapes and sizes and channels, and vendors and regulators and the GSEs and downstream, buyers of MBS, et cetera. So the MISMO is bigger than the 6-person staff that we have. It's this community of hundreds of experts that volunteer their knowledge and time to collectively create standards that benefit the entire ecosystem.
So do you see MISMO evolving as we talk about AI? Historically, MISMO has been for a lot of the techies, right? Those people that could help develop the industry standards, and they knew the data and they knew the specific workflows. And these were people that are highly competent in mortgage technology. With AI and tools like Replit and low code or no code, do you see a lot more opening up where more business users can be more actively engaged in the MISMO community?
Yes, and I say that confidently because, like, literally the second day I was in my MISMO chair, somebody congratulated me on LinkedIn and then DM'd me, asking if I had 20 minutes. They wanted to run something by me, so I'm like, yeah, sure. And this more small mortgage broker,
Okay.
I got on the phone with, and he's like, "Can I share my screen?" He shared his screen, and he proceeded to show me how he built a not an LOS, not a point of sale, but a tool that he's using in his business that he built through one of those low code, no code platforms, all leveraging MISMO standards.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was as practical in real life as I could see. Like, and then of course my immediate reaction was, how do we make sure we get credit for that? I mean, and he was very complimentary of all the work that's been done up to the point. But the point was that he was able to confidently build this tool that he's now using in his small lending business because he could rely on the standards that were created by the industry for the industry.
I love that example, and I think that's kind of the point I was looking at of I think MISMO is going to continue to grow and explode, not only just under your leadership and the networks you have and the great voice you've been for the industry, but I think when you combine that with how technology is evolving and I don't have to know how to code to say, wow, I can start using these standards and I can be involved in the MISMO work groups and share those things. So how do people get involved with MISMO?
Yeah, so we're a membership organization, and we essentially are funded through three principal channels. We have non-lender members, so think of those as your vendor service providers.
Yep.
And they have a membership, and it tiers from 5,000 to 50,000 because there's all kinds of benefits and number of boot camp licenses and all kinds of stuff that you get.
Okay.
And then we hold 3 events per year that are in-person summits. And these are different than like your traditional mortgage conference. There's one day of programming that's kind of that you would see at most conferences where it's a learning opportunity. But then the other 2.5, 3 days are working sessions. That's where the work groups get their 3 times a year together in real life versus the Zoom stuff that they do otherwise to come together and advance big problems that they're working on in their particular group to solve for. So that's another piece of revenue there. We have certifications. So companies, typically tech vendors, can get certified that they're using the correct MISMO standards, and then individuals can get certified, typical as like integration consultants. And then the last channel, which is I think a little bit unknown, and this is part of my awareness strategy, is we have this innovation investment fee that lenders are assessed. So each year, at the end of the year, as part of the MERS registration process, MERS creates a separate innovation investment fee invoice that's delivered to lenders based on their MERS registrations. And so for a loan that is part of that invoice at a lender level, the innovation investment fee is 75 cents per loan. It used to be a cup of coffee 10 years ago, right? It's 75 cents per loan. And that is the IIF, the innovation investment fee that lenders are assessed. Now, what most people don't realize is that while the invoice happened, the payment of the invoice is voluntary. And so a lot of what my team, the small team, is doing is out having conversations and building awareness and making sure people understand that literally they don't have a loan in their ecosystem that doesn't have a MISMO standard in
standard.
use.
Yep.
And so again, I'll say this a lot, but we exist by and for the community, and we rely on those funding sources, in particular the IIF, to continue to advance important work on behalf of the entire industry. And if we have time, I'll tell you about a current initiative, because I think every lender out there should be paying attention to this one, because there's some value here. I'll go right into it. Okay, so one of the not sure how soon this is getting published, but one of the newest standards published by MISMO is called the Mortgage Compliance Dataset, MCD.
Okay.
We're big on acronyms, by the way. So MCD is essentially a standard data set, a mortgage compliance data set. And if you're a multi-state lender, 10, 15, I was just talking with a lender that's licensed in 49 states. Today, when your regulator is asking for information, they typically start with a data file. And so you could argue that, there's probably at least 20 different structures, maybe 49 different structures out there.
Yep.
when a state is asking a lender for their data, right? So the MCD, the Mortgage Compliance Data Set, the standard is the ultimate North Star of this MCD is that every state adopts it as the standard by which they will request data from lenders for their audit. So this is like step one of a multi-step process to build standardization across states, so that now I, as a 49 state lender, perhaps can repurpose one of my full-time employees to do something other than to compile data, because I can
for every individual state. Exactly.
Build once, use often, which there's a hard cost that you can easily quantify.
Yep.
There's anytime you do things multiple times, different ways, you're opening yourself up for error and risk. So this should reduce risk in terms of the quality of the data that you produce. And then, frankly, if you're only having to create one data set, as a lender, you should have earlier visibility into potential problems that might be in your data that could affect multiple states. And so you have an opportunity to kind of self-police yourself and correct things that may have been broken along the way that resulted in a data error somewhere.
I love it. You got a lot of exciting things. If people want to find out more about MISMO, if they want to get signed up, if they want to join some of the work groups, if they want to talk to you, what's the best way they can go about doing that?
I'm a LinkedIn guy, so I'll say come to me on LinkedIn. But if you prefer not to come to my way, go to mismo.org. Not only, there's a ton of information on mismo.org. You can see all the standards. You can see a roster of all the working groups. If there's something interesting to you as a company and you want one of your team members to join, or if you individually are interested, you can sign up right there. And then membership, the information for membership is there as well. And I would say this, on December 3rd, again, I don't know when we're publishing, but on December 3rd, there's a virtual free workshop co-presented by MISMO and the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. That is phase one of this tech sprint that will eventually, take this MCD that I described and create a standard that states will adopt and use. So if you want to be part of the solution and be heard, send your legal compliance, expert to that workshop and be in the room and learn what's going on. And then I would challenge you, after you've been in the room to learn what's going on, join us in January in Amelia Island, Florida. So depending on where you're coming from, it's not a bad place to go in January, where we'll be holding the MISMO Winter Summit. And we're going to do another 3-hour tech sprint workshop that builds off of the first December 3rd virtual workshop. So a lot going on, a lot of opportunities to get involved, and a lot of ways to not only make your process and your company better, but again, make our industry better.
I love it. You're doing a lot of great stuff. The industry is so fortunate to have you in this leadership role. Once again, congratulations. Can't wait to hear about a lot of the other things going on. You are welcome back anytime. Thank you for being a guest, Brian, on this episode of the FinTech Hunting Podcast.
Thank you, Michael.